have a quorum or you need me, that's my time frame, okay?
Okay, so does anybody, Jeff, thank you. Does anybody else need to leave early just so we have a sense? Because we need 4 for the quorum.
I'm good right up till 1:30, but I do have
Good to 1:32.
hard stop at 1.
I'm
All right.
good as long as you need me.
Very good. Thank you, everyone. All right, with that, the regular meeting of the Uptown Special Service District Advisory Board will now begin. Good afternoon. My name is Michael McLaughlin. I will be facilitating this meeting of the Uptown Special Service District Advisory Board. Before we begin, I'd like to note that this meeting includes the remote participation of members as authorized under Minnesota statute section 13D.021 due to the declared local health pandemic. I will now call this meeting to order and call the roll so that we may verify the presence of a quorum. Board members, when I call your name, please indicate that you are present. Mike Finn is not present. Nicholas Hall.
Present.
Jeff Herman.
Present.
Jackie Knight.
Present.
Bob Sorensen.
Present.
Dan Treble.
Present.
And Nick Walton is not present. And then I'll note that we're joined by David Bauer and myself representing the city of Minneapolis. And at this point, we do not have any guests that have joined us from the public. With there being a quorum of advisory board members present, we will proceed. The first item on the agenda, the first 2 items we can take as one action item if desired, and that would be the adoption of the agenda and the approval of the minutes to what was the April meeting. Is there any discussion on either item? And if not, would someone like to make a motion to adopt them as drafted if there are no discussion? If there is no discussion.
I adopt as necessary. Yep.
I'll second it.
I second.
There's no further conversation. I will call the roll on the adoption of the proposed agenda and the draft minutes as submitted. Mike Finn is absent. Nicholas Hall.
Here as well.
Sorry, we're voting, so it's aye or nay. I should have made it more clear. Here, sorry. Jeff Herman.
Aye.
Jackie Knight.
Aye.
Bob Sorensen.
Aye.
Dan Treble.
Aye.
I will note also that Nick Walton is absent. So the agenda and the minutes to the prior meeting are approved as distributed. We will table the public comment period until the end of the meeting should someone from the public join us and want to address the group. Moving on to the discussion items, and I will quickly share my screen, and I tend to go through this pretty quickly. I have so many things on my screen right here. I wanted to quickly go over the annual report. Was included in the packet. Moment to share my screen. Should do that. So everybody see the annual report?
Yes.
Very good. So we just wanted to highlight a few things. This follows the format we put in place for the 2019 year in report. We start with an overview of the advisory board. I'm going to go through this quickly, but by all means, pause and let me know if you have, or let us know if you have questions. I'll zoom in a little bit here. We recapped that we did have 56.4 inches of snow accumulation for the calendar year. So that included the first part of the year as well as the end of the year. Sidewalk sweeping, the pan and broom was done 108 times over the course of the year. So just over twice a week, January through December, and we collected just under 3,200 cubic feet of trash from those services. We also did a spring and a fall cleanup of the district. Moving on to the trash and recycling, you can see just over 37,000 cubic feet of trash were removed from your 60 district maintained trash receptacles, and almost 25,000 cubic feet of recycling materials removed from your 41 district maintained one-sort recycling receptacles. We did, as previously discussed, where appropriate, we did adjust those service levels to reflect the footfalls that were happening in the district due to the pandemic. Where we could, we adjusted down just to save the district some money, since obviously pedestrian traffic and vehicular traffic wasn't the same last year, of course. Of course, the seasonal decorations on all the light poles, so we memorialized that, maintained the electrical system, along with the utility costs. remove the graffiti in the public right of way. So we had just over 2,800 instances of graffiti that we abated in the public right of way. We watered some smaller, younger trees during the course of the growing season as part of your streetscape maintenance. We also did the test, we're going to talk about in just a couple minutes, of the Walk Your Wheels sidewalk decals to encourage people to not ride bikes or scooters or the things like that on the sidewalk. Year-end financial report, just to recap, your amended budget was $912,670. We ended up spending $313,463 of that. A big chunk of that, 455,000, for everybody's line of sight, it was your surplus from the prior year. So you actually increased your surplus from 19 to year end 2020. So it was $599,207, and you'll see that reflected in your amended 2021 budget in just a moment. So all of those dollars were carried forward and are available to spend this year. And then that's just the service plan. Any questions, comments on the annual report? There's no action on this item. It has already gone to council and been published on the city website. So, all right, with that, we'll keep moving. Quite a bit to report on 2021 here. And so here's the, let me start off with the amended report. Let me do this just so it's a little easier to read. Again, this is in the packet. So the original budget, you had $357,000 in service charges. You see that 599,207 carried forward from last year. So your amended budget is 956,207. Obviously, we have a number of new initiatives underway this year. So we very clearly will be using up some of that surplus this year, and we have a couple of additional things we want to talk to the group about. So this is your amended budget. I'm going to take, if there's no questions specifically on the financials, I thought I would just spend a few minutes and provide updates on where we're at on a number of things. So let me just jump to that, and I'm going to go off some notes here just because I wanted to make sure I covered everything. So first and foremost, let me just do that. Service response resulting from the protest over the last week. We wanted to just enumerate those very quickly. So please know that crews were out over the weekend to help reposition any moved streetscape furniture. There have been some videos of things posted where, you know, people moving things or attempting to move things. Please know that crews were on it both on Friday. So we would have had our normal pan and broom and trash receptacle services on Friday. Crews were out again on Saturday. They actually coordinated just in the field with other public works and city crews to help clean up and reposition things. We have re-anchored any trash receptacles that were removed or knocked off their bases. Any that we couldn't secure, we either put a chain on them to a pole so they couldn't go away very far, you know, because they're kind of rolling them. They're pretty heavy. You can't really lift them. Or we did have a couple that got damaged, that got hit by a vehicle, both our trash and recycling. So those have been removed from the district for now, and we've moved a few things around just to make sure we've got receptacles at high traffic locations. We have been, since earlier this week, since the beginning of the week, we have been doing daily pan and broom services, and we've turned that on at least through Sunday, just recognizing that there are people in the district every night. We'll see how things go. If there's still sort of that higher level of you know, public demonstrations happening every night, we'll just continue that, just so at least every morning we're kind of resetting from a litter and trash perspective. Similarly, we have increased the graffiti abatement services. We typically do that twice a week in the summer. We've moved that to 3 times a week. So again, this is only on the public right of way. We know there's a significant increase in graffiti on buildings, but again, we can't touch that. But we wanted to at least address what we could address in the public right of way. Also know that crews are, you know, as always, but particularly with everything going on, actively monitoring and reporting out to us, you know, daily, if not several times a day, of, hey, we're seeing this, hey, this is happening. So just know that we are getting that field intel from our contractors. And because some receptacles have been damaged, we had one or two that were missing before any of this happened. So at this point, we are at a count of at least 4 receptacles that we'll need to purchase this year to replace either damaged or missing trash and recycling receptacles. So again, out of a universe of over 100, 4 isn't too bad at this point, but know that we'll be doing that proactively. And then in terms of the service plan for the remainder of the year, we'll continue with pan and broom, presumably once things sort of aren't as acute in terms of the interest and activity in Uptown. Our plan is to continue with the pan and broom 3 times a week, which is a service level we implemented last summer. So that would continue through the end of October. Trash and recycling receptacle services will continue to be serviced 3 times a week. If that needs to increase, we'll just do that automatically because we really obviously don't want overflowing trash receptacles. And then we'll, once we're comfortable, we'll drop the graffiti abatement back down to its normal level in the summer, which is twice a week. So that's all of those things would be through October. And then typically in October, depending on the weather, is where we kind of transition into winter mode, where while those services don't stop, the frequency drops a little bit on a weekly basis. Any questions on those services before I get into some of the policing, the buyback and the cameras and a couple other things?
Can I make a quick comment?
You bet.
I have noticed that like this morning, the sidewalks do need a pan and broom. There's significant trash out there.
Okay.
I also noticed that a lot of the sidewalks have graffiti on there, and maybe we'll have to consider power spraying. That's it. Thanks.
Bob, thank you. Yes, we actually discussed that just a day or two ago with the contractor, that if they are seeing, because we saw a lot of that last summer, that if we are seeing graffiti on sidewalks, that we will just proactively go out and pressure wash it off, which is exactly what we did last year. So they hadn't reported a lot of that as of a couple of days ago, but again, there's been nightly activity. So things can obviously pop up from one night to the next. So that would be our plan, and I appreciate the question.
Is there an option for Saturday trash pickup?
There is. We could either move Friday to Saturday, or we could add a Saturday. Absolutely.
I saw a number of videos of fires being started in trash cans. So to the extent that we can do our best to, when there is that activity, to make sure our trash is emptied. So maybe it's more of a response situation. If we know Friday night is a tough night, maybe we try and do it on Saturday just to get those bins emptied so there's less to burn.
It's a great suggestion. Definitely. I like that note. Okay, moving on. And again, we have a packed agenda, so I'm just going to keep going, but pause and let me know if you have a question.
Sorry, Michael, one more question. So there were, I saw at least one tree at the walkway be started on fire. Do we need to check all of our trees in the district to figure out that status?
We will do that. Appreciate that feedback. And we will definitely do that. And then does the board have a preference? So we can either work with the park board to see if they can do add that to their fall replacement. They're pretty much done with planting trees. And I imagine they're probably done just given the heat for now, but they typically do a fall planting. So again, our options are we can work with the park board and plant a tree. Otherwise, we can have a tree replaced at district expense. If the park board does it, there's no expense to the district. Does the group have a preference?
Park board.
I'm seeing nods. Okay. Very good. Thank you for that feedback. All right. Moving on to the policing, the buyback program, the update. The program has been in place since early January. Just as a refresher, the target service hours and dates are 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. Sunday through Wednesday, and 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. Thursday through Saturday. To date, the district has paid for 595 additional policing hours for a total program cost through the end of May of just over $39,000, $39,414. So we are running under our original run rate of what was originally thought to be $20,000 a month. So we're averaging right around $8,000 a month. we're still getting coverage. Some of the costs aren't coming in as high as we thought. I will say by and large, all of the shift requests have been filled. There are some dates and a few periods where those shifts weren't filled, but overwhelmingly, most of those shifts are being filled. So these were single officer shifts. There have been, as we've gotten into spring, some pairing up of officers, which, based on our prior conversations, we were comfortable with giving the go-ahead that the board would be comfortable with that expense. So it's not every shift, but it seemed to make sense, especially as spring kind of moved on.
Could I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
So when those people are hired, what's their path, or what is their directive, or I guess, are they just hanging out at Lake and Hennepin, or are they going all over the district, or how does that work?
Yeah, very much the latter. We have provided them with the service frontage map of the district, and they are expected to be, patrolling the entire district, and not just sort of sitting in one spot, if you will. Now, obviously, they're allowed to take breaks and all those kinds of things. And when it was cold, they were could jump in a squad or a business. They also are doing the business drop-ins for those businesses that have requested them. So they're also doing that while they're doing their patrol. So very much throughout the district, we're relying on them to, that they are getting through the entire district, but it isn't that it is not a post-up situation where they're just right at Lake and Hennepin and are stationary.
Okay, thank you.
I have one quick comment.
Okay.
As the seasons change, nothing happens until after 9 o'clock in Uptown right now. I know in February and March, April, 5 o'clock was a good time to start, but the sidewalks are pretty empty and there's nothing happening at the current hours that they're patrolling.
And part of that, appreciate the comment, Bob. In working with MPD, the very clear guidance to help ensure that shifts were filled was if we could align it with either after a prior shift ended or before a later shift started, that we'd have more success filling the slots. So that's where 5 o'clock's the start time seemed to be a more optimal time to start. I don't think, it's acknowledged what you said, especially, as we get into, in the winter when it's cold and stuff like that, there are probably even fewer out. But so that was kind of the rationale, and the minimum was the 4 hours. So we could certainly look at that. Not saying we wouldn't be able to fill the shifts, but there might be a change in being able the capacity to fill them. So
there's been a large police presence in Uptown every night, like starting 10, 11 o'clock at night till about 2 o'clock.
Well, and the other part of it was we intentionally wanted to design it away from the late night hour police details that were happening, because one, that doesn't necessarily or shouldn't necessarily doesn't have to be an SSD expense is probably the best way to say it. And we didn't, MPD has clearly been working with a lot of the late night operators to develop a program about how late night is best managed. And we didn't want this to run into it and create, so we don't have to pay for this, or, however those things are working. So that's why we intentionally ended it, knowing that there were other efforts in place to address those late night hours, obviously notwithstanding the last week, but just normal late night sort of operations. So the update on the safety camera, all 12, and Nicholas had mentioned this a couple of minutes ago, all 12 additional safety cameras have been installed at this point. So the last one went online just within the last 2 weeks here. Most of them went online in April. Just wanted to let you know. So, and the SSD's contribution of $75,000, we did cap it at that. So the cost per camera for the district ended up only being $6,250. So I say only $6,250. We were talking about a higher number originally. So just wanted to let everyone know that, and it's been a great partnership between MPD, IT, your SSD project team, and it seems to have worked pretty smoothly. And those cameras are all visible not only at the 5th precinct, but to any place MPD needs them, be it the emergency response centers and things like that. So please know that that contribution has been into effect, and those additional resources are now in place.
Do we have a map of those 12 where we are?
That is something right now we're not sure that that's public information. So that's the quickest answer I can give you. But the I guess understand internally we know where they were placed. We just haven't been told that that's a piece of information we can share publicly at this point. So
I think
this
just
so the third component of the safety initiative, we are the goal is still to issue an RFP for the private security services that the group had discussed back in December. Due to a lot of other work plan items this year with all of our 15 districts, that is something that is very much in the queue, but it is not something that we have been able to put out to bid at this point, but that is the intent, is to get that out yet this year. So just wanted to let you know that we had certainly not in any way forgotten about that strategy, but given everything that's happened over the last couple months, that one is just in queue. So moving on, I wanted to mention we've talked in the past about some greening of the district, and wanted to broach
Michael,
yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. When are we going to be able to have some discussion on the security? Do you want to go through whatever else that you're going to go through and then open it up to discussion?
Are you specifically referring to the private security or just security in general? Because we can talk about
Security in
that.
general.
Okay, go for it.
Well, what I'd like to know is, and Bob, you made a comment about the presence of the security. Someone else made a comment to me questioning the effectiveness of the security. So I'd like to understand from the rest of the group, and in particular, people that may have seen more of what's going on, whether we think it's effective or not, whether it's been making a change or not. And so that was my question. If everyone could give me some feedback.
I'd be glad to. Since I have all these new cameras that I just installed and I can watch them live from my cell phone, as well as recordings for the next year. What I've noticed is I have not seen the police ever actually stop any of the craziness that's going on the sidewalk or in the alley behind my building. There are events every night. Most of it's not really criminal, but a lot of it's kind of on the edge of it. And they do drive down the street with their lights on and things like that. But there is a lot of what I would call gang-related activity every night out there right now. And it was quiet the last couple of days, and then it started up again last night. It gets really wild at about 2 in the morning, 1 in the morning.
Well, again, our buyback services would not be occurring that late at night. So just to sort of segment this a little bit, my understanding, Jeff, your question was about the services, the buyback services that the service district is covering.
Yeah, I was just looking at for some feedback so that I can understand what we want to do. If we should be increasing it, if we should be changing those hours. I can tell you that at least one of my tenants has not felt that it's been effective, and even in one instance has felt that it was not. It was the opposite of that, where they felt intimidated, and some of their clients and customers were very intimidated by the individual, the off-duty person who came in there, and just their interaction. So I just had, in general, some some concerns and wanted to get more feedback from the group on what we think we should do moving forward. So that was the reason for my comment. Also, that are the hours that we have the appropriate hours? Should we be having them later at night at this point? But I can tell you that I've heard very mixed feelings on whether they've been effective or not.
Jeff, I can share with you in the context of the Lake Street Council over the past year, I would say it's probably 50-50 business owners that feel that a police presence is a positive thing versus they feel that it is a negative thing. I had not realized that it was such a deep issue, but it is. And so I do think that there are probably a lot of business owners that aren't comforted by the police being there. I don't know that it's effective from a crime stopping standpoint. I think from a reality, if there's 3 or 4 people doing something, a single officer is not going to engage. That's just practical. And I think with what we're seeing over the last week, even with a huge police presence, they aren't able to stop what's happening. So our service is probably more to make people emotionally feel better, like from a visibility standpoint, versus actually stopping any crime.
Nicholas?
That's good to know.
Can you hear me? I'm having trouble with my mute button.
Yep. Now we can. Yep.
Okay, good. I guess the one thing is I've noticed, I drive through Uptown 4 or 5 times a day, and I've noticed a police presence. They've been over on my property in Irving and Lake Street. They sit by a gate, and they do some driving around the area. I think it's made a little bit of a difference, but I think that changing the hours to the hours where the checking into that, I think, is an important factor to have it in the middle of the night when the issues are there, and see if that adjustment can be made and get those slots filled. So, it's hard to measure, obviously, and it's one of those type of things where I think spending the money that's under budget right now for this has been money well spent. Anything we can do to help our tenants, our customers, our clients is money well spent, in my opinion. And not everyone's going to always agree with more police presence or less, but I think that since we're setting it up and we're trying to make it more of a community and all of us work together to make things safer by more cameras and things like that is something that is a good step forward, in my opinion.
Would the
Michael
board?
and Dan, I know you guys have been really involved in downtown and the DID down there. I think if that's the right name for it.
Yep.
Is there something, knowing our budget, is there something that has been working better down there or different down there that you see would be helpful for us?
Well, again, given the DID's budget of over $7 million, obviously the resources that they're able to bring to crime and livability issues is significantly more than your budget, at least at this point, would allow. DID does do their own buyback in addition to their DID ambassadors. They also have livability teams that are part of their safety budget. So they often will contract with nonprofit service providers, whether it's homeless outreach or other types of outreach to work with people. They also, as of this year, have been able to hire I believe they're a Hennepin County social worker, or it's an additional social worker focused on downtown. So are there things that downtown is doing that Uptown could certainly think about? I would say yes. It always comes back to scale. For them, $100,000 or $150,000 initiative is, let's just try it and see if it works. I'm speculating, given their budget, versus for you guys, that is, that would be a pretty, that would be almost almost half your operating budget when you take out your surplus. So that's where it becomes challenging. While we would say, yes, we can see what downtown is doing and that, it certainly seems to be helping downtown. When we talk to districts outside of downtown, the scale of the money just sort of doesn't align real well. So it's really challenging.
But are those things that you just mentioned for doing downtown, are they specifically for taking care of the problems that are happening from 10 at night till 2 in the morning?
I would say most of their DID spends, so I'm speculating here, but my sense is they spend a lot of money during the day. Their ambassadors, for example, are done at 11 p.m. In normal, and they actually just went back to that just recently, for example. So they do have their fusion center operates till bar close, but really it's my sense is, and I'm happy to be corrected, is that late night hour stuff is less DID and more MPD. The livability, the social worker, those kinds of things, the outreach workers, my sense is they generally are out during the business day into the evening more than they are focused on that 10 p.m. to 2, 3 in the morning slot. I mean, and I want to be clear, I do believe they do some services and some of those things in those late night hours. I'm just saying, if you looked at overall their budget, I think you would see most of it spent, before 11 p.m. and during the day. So
one thing that I saw that was effective this last issue that happened was when they brought in, and I'm not good with my names, someone may know better, but moms and dads or other type of groups that really was able to, their presence was able to calm certain, I think from getting even a little bit more out of hand, but I don't know what ability that we have to bring in some of those groups as a presence, what those costs are, and save the officer piece of this for more later in the evening. And it's just an observation and a suggestion without understanding the costs. But I agree with Bob to some extent, is the element that we don't want is coming out later. And there hasn't been as much issue during the daytime. And I think I would like to see more of, we'll call it quote unquote ambassador type of situation, these nonprofit groups that might be able to come out more during the daytime. And I'm just putting that out there as, again, a suggestion and observation without knowing what this is going to cost us.
Yeah. So one thing we've more recently learned is that the city does have a citywide outreach services contract that is intended to provide sort of some of those livability type services outside of downtown. And we have been, some of the homeless outreach and bringing resources to people that may need it, that are homeless and camping on the sidewalk, that kind of thing. So we've actually been trying to connect with that and get a better understanding of how, can we alert them to issues that are happening not only in your district, candidly along other, other parts of Lake Street and not just on the south side. But so that is something that we could further explore. So therefore it might not even have to be SSD dollars, I guess is where I'm going here, to spend on those types of activities. We certainly could explore, and I would differentiate a little bit between ambassadors and the social services outreach work. Because they are like ambassadors, but they're not ambassadors like in the DID context. Those are actual trained hospitality ambassadors.
I agree with what you're saying.
Yep.
And the differentiation. I agree with you on the prior of the two that you were talking about. Meaning the more social service. Yeah.
So what's the consensus of the group? Do you want to, I guess one question, do you want to continue MPD in its current program? Do you want to see if we can explore adjustments? And you know, what might those other, is there a desire for some of these other ideas we've been talking about? Thoughts?
I personally feel that we should spend, and I don't see if people raise their hands. I'm sorry. I'm happy to be patient, but I think that we need to perhaps spend our money, and maybe more of our money, on focusing the off-duty officers towards the evening. And I really think that it makes a lot of sense to engage the other organizations that you're talking about, especially the homeless piece of this, if it's free to us. I have not seen, and Bob, you may speak to that, or Nicholas, that I believe that our homeless or panhandler situation has gotten less in the heart of Uptown. Coming into Uptown, it's not changed at all. But I think just more presence like that out on the streets, especially if we don't have to pay for it, I'm 100% in favor of, and would like our group to approve doing.
Bob?
I concur what Jeff is saying. I'm not seeing as much homelessness, though I've had some people in camp in the entryway of my store at night. I am seeing homeless people late at night wandering around and doing the kind of things they do. But yeah, an outreach person to come and talk to some of these people, I think that's a great idea.
Dan?
Yeah, no, I would agree with that, particularly if we're not, if it's a free service, then I don't know why we wouldn't. I think more presence is better than less presence, for sure.
Okay. Well, just on that, so we will contact the city's Office of Prevention, which is where that contract is housed, and explore what that looks like for your district, specifically to the MPD coverage. We could explore later hours. I would just share again, based on our conversations with the inspector when we set up the program, they really didn't seem to think that made a lot of sense given everything else they were trying to do at night. Doesn't mean we can't request it. I just want to restate that there seemed to be benefit of sort of separating out as I was saying, the late night policing operations from the sort of regular patrol that you guys are paying for, is part of the buyback. So I'm not.
Michael,
yeah, go ahead,
you
Jackie.
get feedback from them to understand based on where we're at right now, because we had that conversation a few months ago, right? And things have changed to some degree. Can we have a follow-up to say, does it still make sense, or what would you recommend, or to see if they have different thoughts based on current circumstances?
Does the group have if it's not the current hours, does the group have a different time slot or days of the week you would like to? Like, do we want 10 to 2? Is that what you guys are looking for? I'm making that up.
That would be, 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock maybe. Is it a 4-hour shift or a 6-hour shift?
And it's minimum of 4.
I think between 9 and 3, that's when the craziness happens. Why not have that ability to do that? At least see if it's available,
Others agree?
I totally agree with that from what I'm seeing on our block.
Yeah, that's when the problems are happening. We might as well take it head on. Great.
Well, we will definitely go back and work with the inspector and report back out to you. I want to be clear. They didn't say, no, we couldn't do that, or they wouldn't do that. I'm just sharing some insight into what they had said at the time. The other piece, again, Jackie, to your point of things have changed. When we were talking about this in December, it was very clearly the advisory board's desire to have these officers out during the day, during, the normal, traditional business hours, as opposed to trying to solve the late night issue. So that was also part of what informed the original decision to go with the evening hours. So, all right, well, we will work with the inspector and bring that message back to the group. Anything,
Michael, as we're paying for these off-duty, can we get some feedback from them as to what they think is working, not working?
Absolutely.
I second that.
Anything else the group would like to discuss on the safety front before we move on to a couple other things? And I'm just noting the time. We are at about 1:48, and we do want to end at 1:30, and we still want to get through the rest of your 2021 work plan and talk about 2022 and a 2022 service charge methodology possible change. So, okay. So question on greening the district. We have another district that this is merely an idea. We had previously talked about doing the sidewalk planters that are on the sidewalk itself. I'm going to share a picture my screen. So we have a district that is going to be doing hanging baskets. So it's Lynn Lake, so I don't have to be oblique about it. Is this that we're going to be pursuing that this year for that district. And because these are pole mounted, and these are just some examples of stuff I found online, but it's this type of style of planter we're going to go with. It kind of clamshells around a light pole as opposed to sort of hanging off an arm like you might have seen in a lot of other commercial districts. There's a lot of reasons why we like this, and I originally found this for downtown, so these are downtown and have been since the beginning. But not that other cities haven't discovered them. I didn't make these things up. I'm not taking credit for that, by the way. But we wanted to at least ask the question, since we were going to be putting out a bid for these with a pretty substantial order for Lynn Lake. Is this something either in addition to or in lieu of the sidewalk planters that this group would have any interest in pursuing? And to be clear, we could. The idea is during the summer, they would have flowers in them, and in the winter, we could do spruce tips in them. So they could be have material in them year round, and no obligation. We wanted to ask the question. I'm
Yeah, I'll go with that. The Uptown Association did it a number of years ago, and the flowers aren't that expensive, but the maintenance, because they need to be watered daily, can be quite significant. That's my real only comment. They're pretty, but the maintenance costs for watering it can be quite a bit.
That is true, especially when we have heat spells like we are currently in. No question there. So, not seeing yes, no, indifferent to the sidewalk planters.
Yeah, pretty indifferent.
I will say one of the reasons we thought we would mention this is not having stuff on the sidewalk is one less thing to interfere with snow operations and or other types of things that are happening on the sidewalk. So not a reason not to still pursue sidewalk planters. Just wanted to throw that out.
I think it'd be a nice addition to Uptown.
I think they look nice. I'd support getting a price so we can understand what it means.
Oh, yeah. So rough numbers, year one with the fixture, installing, watering, summer, winter, our estimate is around $1,000 a year per unit. Year two and afterward, we wouldn't have the fixture cost, so we're probably in the 750 range per year per unit. Those costs are also very similar to a sidewalk planter. I mean, by the time you get the labor out to put the water in, the plant material is a little different. You can put typically a little bit more plant material in a sidewalk planter versus a hanging basket. But that our rule of thumb, even for sidewalk planters, is $1,000 a season per unit. So Rough numbers. I'm just giving you a rule of thumb. Pursue it. I've heard a couple people say yes. Would it be thoughts on in lieu of or in addition to the sidewalk planters?
I'm kind of thinking about it because you'd need one close to every other property or so. So that would be an additional significant amount in property taxes per property owner. And the other comment I have is so much Uptown is boarded up right now. Possibly a year from now might be a better time because, you know, I mean, it could make it prettier this year, but so there's so many empty storefronts and boarded up buildings.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. For your district, we'd likely be looking at not flowers this year because honestly, flowers are in very short supply for the quantities that we would be ordering. I don't know if you bought anything, any of these types of things for any of your properties, but we're not saying you have to do this. I want to be clear. I'm just describing the art of the possible. If you wanted to do this for your district, we'd like to be looking at a winter greening would be the first thing that we would put at them, and then a spring planting next year. You don't need to do this. I would just note that we were already allocating to buy 50 of the sidewalk planters and the commitment to maintenance on those. So all in, you were probably going to be looking at $75,000 for that. So either way, I mean, our plan was to proceed with that unless we had different guidance from the group to go with the hanging baskets, or if the group wanted to do both. But Bob, to your point, then there is definitely an added operational capacity or, you know, piece you're putting in your budget that is not currently in your budget, to be clear. We're using surplus dollars at this point to pay for these things.
Well, I think these would make more sense than the planters. So in lieu of the planters, I think it makes sense if the money's already allocated.
Thoughts on that, Bob?
Planters could interrupt some of the sidewalk cafes that are trying to open up again.
That's another factor.
Yep.
Jackie, you're going to say something?
I mean, these are probably harder to start on fire, right? So I'd probably vote for the ones up in the air. Give us a little distance at least.
And we got to give people a reason to come back to Uptown. And, you know, anything we can do to beautify and make things more available to fill these empty spaces, I think that's a win.
Jeff, I know you can't see the picture that I've got on here, but they're beautiful and verdant hanging planters on light poles in commercial districts. So, Jeff, did you have any thoughts before we lose you? You might have already lost Jeff. Jeff, if you're talking, I can't hear you. So switch over and do these.
I concur.
Okay. We'll go with that. Dan, if you feel differently, maybe you had to take a call. Let us know. So we'll do that. And our thinking was, if you like the idea, while you have 165 low-level polls, to keep this financially manageable, maybe we start with most visible 50 locations. So that would be just under a third of your polls. So we could do it at more than just corners, but you know, we'd probably do corners and then strategic mid-block locations, and put a program like that together. So we will, based on this conversation, we'll pursue that. Doesn't mean we can't at some point pick up the sidewalk planter conversation again, if that's something the group wants to do. So let's, Dan, you all right with that?
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, no worries.
I'm fine
All
with
right.
that.
I'm gonna move on to the Walk Your Wheels. Our intent was to install these yet this summer. We had good success with the pilot last year, so we have these and we were gonna put the rest of these out. So again, this is just some messaging to encourage people to not bike and scooter on the sidewalks. Just wanted to let you know that. Final thing before we move on to 222. So, and it was Jeff who has had to leave us here, but he had reached out to us and asked if the group could consider okaying a temporary banner program. So this is an example up on Central Avenue where on their low-level poles during the warmer months, so we don't put these up in winter, but they allow events and groups in partnership with the SSD to put temporary banners that are up for maybe 4 or 6 weeks leading up to an event to help promote that event. So this is, we'd certainly, if this were to be allowed, we would want board's concurrence. The intent certainly was that this would be revenue neutral to the district. So if there was an interest in allowing groups to do this, that group would pay for the printing cost, the installation cost, the removal cost, things like that. But we'd have to partner with the district in order to put stuff up and down is sort of how this could work. The no obligation to, Jeff just wanted to ask, and I said, well, let's bring it up at the board meeting. So, and these, to be clear, we've done this in Central and it's worked really well. These are inexpensive corrugated plastic banners that they put on their low-level poles. And we've got a couple different ways. You're seeing one approach to how we can mount them. There are other ways, but that's the idea behind this. Now, I should be clear, the city has a very specific ordinance on banners and what can be promoted on the banners. So anything that would be part of this would have to fall within all of those ordinance parameters. So it isn't just anybody that can, or any event that can do things. Thoughts on this idea?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. The Uptown Art Fair is trying to get organized to open into something like maybe their organization might maybe wanting to do something like that to make people aware that the art fair isn't closed forever like so many other events. I mean, I'm really supportive of it.
I concur.
Agreed.
Great. All right, we'll work out the details. And if a group wants to come to us, we'll just kind of let people know that, and you can let people, excuse me, no, I'm talking too much today, that's an opportunity. All right, with that.
I'm sorry, Michael, specific to that opportunity, do we have a guess of what the cost is for that user from a production and installation standpoint?
Yeah, so it's less than $100 per banner. And I say that's all in. That's installed, removed. The fabrication is honestly very expensive. I mean, the unit cost on these is probably less than $25 for a double-sided banner. And then do we do 1 per pole, 2 per pole? So honestly, the labor just to get them up securely and take them down is more expensive than the fabrication cost. But that would all be part of it. So I would say $75 to $100 off the top of my head per banner. All right, moving on. Anything else on 2021? Otherwise, our plan is to do everything we've been talking about. 2022, let me go back to sharing a different screen. A draft budget was included in the there we go. Everybody can see that, the draft 2022 budget. So this, I will note just for draft purposes, is a flat budget from a service charge revenue perspective, meaning it stays at the 357,000. I will note though that your actual operating budget a year ago was 457,000 because you had surplus funds that you applied to this year. So this is this is status quo from a revenue service charge perspective. That is where we are starting most districts this year, just given the pandemic and the economic reality of it, what everybody's been going through. It seems only prudent to at least start with a flat revenue budget. And you can see the allocations here. So thoughts on the draft budget, and happy to go through any specific line items. The snow is for 48 inches of accumulation, which is the Twin Cities average. We do have a number of districts that are budgeting for 60 inches of snow, but because this group has carried surpluses, it has seemed prudent to keep it at, from a budgetary perspective, at 48, just recognizing that you'll likely be carrying forward some surplus. The sidewalk sweeping, this all matches your, sort of your normal summer level of services. In terms of pan and broom, emptying trash and recycling and so forth, which is the next line item. seasonal decor would be, again, the installation of the snowflake fixtures. I would note that this 29,000 would not be enough to plant all the hanging baskets that we just talked about. So in thinking about it, because your surplus is so large right now, even with the stuff we have going on, it seems like at least for 2022, we could rely on that you'll have surplus from this year to cover these expenses next year. But that a year from now, when we're asking you for a recommendation for 2023, that would be the time that we would look at building in what that actual operating cost for the enhanced landscaping, for example, would be. So you're carrying so much money forward, it just didn't make sense to us. So I want to just describe that a year from now, to keep doing what you are doing, you would have to increase your service charges. And then also, just for historical context, prior to this year, your service charge level was 457,000. So it is below, if you will, the high water mark, just in terms of relative terms. Not that there's any expectation that you have to get back to 457 by any means, but just want to let you know you have in recent years had higher service charges. And then this does still have the placeholder for safety and security. Same thing. If the police services continue at the current rate, that would clearly not be enough. And or any private security ambassador type services, if that is, when that's implemented. So again, we can rely on that surplus for now, but these are all things I just wanted to flag, like, hey, Michael, why are you coming in a year from now saying, giving us this big budget increase? Well, and I'm just describing what would happen. Thoughts on the draft 2022 budget as drafted? And by all means, nothing set in stone. Nick, you've had your hand up. I didn't know if that was for this or the prior item. Okay. And you're still on mute, but I saw you shake your head. Bob.
Yes, I think we do need to increase the sidewalks sweeping and cleaning for this year. I think there's going to be a lot more ahead of us. I also think that the safety and security services, we're going to have to increase this for next year. And then possibly we got enough this year for streetscape and landscape maintenance for this year, but maybe we might have to increase that. We're just historically in a totally different experience than any of us experienced in our lifetimes going on right now in the last year. So I think we need to increase the budget. We just don't have a choice, I believe. Thank you.
So I guess, Mike, I have a clarifying question.
Yeah.
If we go over on the, if we roll into 2022 and we decide that we want more security, are we able to spend the money that was carried over, or
Yes.
are we capping ourselves here?
No, you are not capping yourself. What you're doing is setting your service charge revenue amount for next year. How much money are we going to charge everybody in their service charges? Presumably, I mean, I'm not always able to say this, but your district, you will end this year with a budget. I mean, it's just so large given everything we've done. We won't write that carry forward. So if you look back at your amended budget of 900-some thousand, we clearly, even with everything we're doing this calendar year 2021, we will not spend it all. So you will have a surplus from year-end 2021, and next spring we'll be able to roll over that surplus to 2022 to add to this budget, so you can still do all the things we've talked about in 2022. And I would say, unless we have just an enormous amount of snow next year or later this year, we feel like we can get through the calendar year 2023, but looking at 2022, excuse me, but looking at 2023, we're going to have to increase your operating budget and your service charges going in a year from now, looking into the next year.
Yeah, I think we keep taxes low in the meantime then. As low as we can. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I'm done. Go ahead.
That's helpful.
I guess I would recommend probably doubling the security budget, because we really need to nip this the best we possibly can. And also, an option is talking to the police about how many more cameras to give us full coverage that they need. Because obviously we don't have full coverage now. 12 is wonderful, but is there an option to add more to give us a little bit more coverage and, response time, and let them work smarter as opposed to harder, because they're still extremely limited on their, the force that, with the force that they're using, the people that are out in the street.
So Nick, just so Nicholas, sorry, so one option is you can increase this and just know that you have more money, or a year from now, you can apply some of those surplus dollars, which we anticipate, to increase that $50,000 in safety for 2022 upwards.
What is everyone's thoughts on additional cameras or talking to the police to get full coverage when it comes to that? What are your thoughts that way?
I guess my thought is I'm absolutely open to more cameras and more police coverage. But if I'm understanding this correctly, we've got, in addition to this, we'll have another $500,000 in or more as far as carryover. And so I would, to me, it's, well, let's just keep the assessment amount that's going out to the property owners as low as we can for now, and then use that money as necessary next year, because I think there's plenty of it to double or triple or quadruple the safety number there.
Dan, that's correct.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I just, I would say I don't know that it's going to be $500,000 between the buyback and the planters and stuff. We are going to use a chunk of that up, but it likely will be north of $200,000-$300,000, just roughly speaking, that you will likely have going into next year on top of this $357,000. So Nicholas, the group next spring could still decide to increase safety, allocate, I'm making up numbers so everybody's clear. Say we end the year with $250,000. You could take 150 of that and add it to the 50 in this budget and have $200,000 to spend next year without increasing the service charges to property owners next year, for example, and still have money to allocate towards the hanging baskets and other things.
Well, since it's a surplus, we wouldn't be adding taxes to the property owners, correct?
Yeah. So, Nicholas, I'm sensing I'm not describing this very well. So what we need to establish today is the service charge amount and the budget for next year. What we can decide next spring is how to amend this budget to include your surplus from this year.
Okay, understandable.
So, and again, I mean, if you recommend, hey, we want an increase on the service charges, we're happy to do that. So I'm not talking you out of that. I just, perspective with everything that's going on, it seems to us, given how much money you have in that you've been carrying over from year to year, stick with this flat service charge, knowing that we'll be able to amend this budget in the spring.
Okay. What's the possibility of, I know we're talking about 2022 budget. Yep. What's the possibility of getting more cameras installed this year? Because we know it takes forever to have that done. It takes about 6 months, it seems like.
Well, we implemented your initial allocation. We could, if you want to allocate more money, we can work with MPD to do that.
I mean, I say another 75 grand. I think it's really important that we get as much technology out there to help us, our neighborhood, and get it done as soon as possible. What does everybody else think?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like now's the time to address the situation.
And streamline it the best we can,
Yes, I concur. I think we should be increasing the budget for this year.
I want to nuance that. You're not increasing the budget. You're allocating your existing surplus towards these items, just so everyone's clear. So your budget is, as put in the, well, here, I'll just go back a page. Your budget right now for this year is $956,000. So what we're talking about is how, adding more known expense to line item number 6 and spending less in some of these other categories if need be. Again, you still have a substantial surplus. So even with everything we're talking about, you still would have $75,000 if you wish to allocate towards cameras, additional cameras for this year. I mean, you just have that much surplus. I mean, at some point, we're going to exhaust that surplus. I want to be very clear to everybody. But for now, you could do all of those things if that's the board's desire.
I propose another 75,000 for cameras being done as soon as possible, and do our best to streamline with the Minneapolis police to get them installed as soon as we can.
Jackie?
Is there some sort of map or recommendation that says how many they would like to have, or which locations they might not have covered that they'd like to see covered? If everything is done at $100,000, I'd rather just do $100,000 now and get all the locations in that they would really like to have in.
Well, great question. One way we could do this, we could work with MPD offline and have that conversation to identify if there are gaps. They feel that there are gaps in their coverage areas. And you could say not to exceed 75,000, but if we can fill those gaps with 8 more cameras rather than another 12, for example, maybe that's a prudent use of SSD dollars. We could, what do folks think of that approach?
I agree with Jackie with 100 grand. I mean, the more we can get, the better we are. And if we have to adjust it a little bit lower because they don't need that coverage, then we spend less money. So I think that makes sense. I second.
I misheard you. You said 100,000, Jackie, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah.
I just don't know what we really need to have the district covered. And I'd rather we just figure out how to get it covered versus doing it piecemeal.
Very good. Consensus on it?
I concur.
We will effectuate that, and based on this discussion, quite honestly, if you're comfortable, if it's somewhat over that, we'll just make it happen, just so you have coverage. Since this is clearly something that there's interest in, and unlike everything else we're talking about, there's no financial tail to this, right? So the MPD takes care of the maintenance. It's one-time dollars, so we don't have to think about, oh, here now we're adding a piece to our annual operating costs here. So. All right, coming back to the draft 2022 budget, I sense that there was, if I read the screen right, I can't even say read the room right because we're not in a room anymore, right? So soon though, our next meeting almost assuredly will be in person. And we actually won't be able to meet remotely going forward once the pandemic, the mayor's declaration that clicks off. On the draft 2022 budget, I sense that there was consensus going with these, given all of the likely amendment we'll be doing next spring with the surplus from this year. Any other discussion? Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to adopt the budget recommendation as drafted?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
I second as well. A third, sorry.
Further discussion? All right. On that motion, I will call the roll. Mike Finn is absent. Nicholas Hall.
Yes.
Jeff Herman is not here. Jackie Knight. Yes. You're approving the budget? Okay. Bob Sorensen.
Yes.
And Treble.
Yes.
And Nick Walton is absent. So, okay, that budget recommendation is adopted. The final item we'd like to spend a couple of minutes on, I included in the packet a draft revised service charge methodology. And I will just note that, Nicholas, you just joined the board, but I think we have talked about this for 4 years in a row. And we keep saying we're going to put it on an agenda and talk about it, and then something comes up and we're not able to talk about it. So though we have 15 minutes before we want to adjourn, we were hoping that the group would at least consider revising your methodology, and I sent out the information in advance with at least a description of the current approach and a draft of how it could be revised. So I'm happy to go through the current methodology, but I mean, the idea behind this is to to really try to streamline and modernize are the two words I can best describe what the intent behind this is. And Bob, as our resident historian here in the district, I'm quickly going to turn to you if there are any historical questions, but to the best of my knowledge, the current methodology dates back to, if not the beginning of the district in the mid 80s, almost that far. And as long as I have been involved in service districts in Minneapolis, the methodology has not been altered. I'm not saying it hasn't been. I'm just saying to the best of my knowledge. And I think everyone would recognize that the land use patterns and the way Uptown is currently developed is dramatically different than it was in the 80s when this budget was, this methodology was put in place, if I'm correct, and that's when it dates back to. But also, our assumption is that the current methodology reflects likely what line items at the time reflected as they were reflected in the budget. So 30% of 80%, these clearly were, it seems clear to us that these were certain line items in the budget, and we've just never adjusted them, and this was back when the district had a budget of under $100,000, right? So they have never been sort of adjusted for as the budget changed. And Bob, I already see that big smile on your face. So you were probably there at the beginning, and I say that with respect because you've been such an institution in the Uptown area for so long. Our professional opinion is the current methodology, while it's been in place, really is not, if we were starting a new district, that is not a methodology we would clearly recommend. And that the proposed methodology, while there's lots of different ways this could be done, there's nothing particularly, the proposed methodology really is in keeping with what we presume the original intent was in your current methodology, while taking some of the nuances out and just simplifying it so that it just could be understandable to any property owner or business owner that is being compelled to pay it. So, Bob?
Yes, I believe the change, what the current formula is, was created in 1996. There were two major property owners whose names I won't mention, who were in competition in some ways, and this is what got pushed through at that time. I do like the new proposed method. My only question on that, since residential is not taxable under this formula, a lot of the new projects right now are mixed use, where there is some business or retail or restaurant on the ground floor. And I just hope that is included, where at least that 2,400 square feet or whatever their 100,000 foot project would be, they would be contributing to the tax base on that. Otherwise, I think that's pretty much all I have to say right now, but I'm very happy.
Great comment, Bob. And only residential condominiums are exempt. The mixed use properties, of which there are many, are all 100% chargeable. So the entire building, so the investor properties, the investment properties would be 100%. And they, to be clear, they are now, and they would continue to be. So we're not proposing a change there. One change would be, there are some commercially zoned but residential uses on West Lake Street. If you go further to the west, towards the lake, that this would change. They're only included on a portion of your service charges. So what we're talking about, we would take out some of those new, and it's only a few properties, to be clear, and that would have that change, where we would be just charging them based on how everybody else is paying, whether it's frontage, so, and you can see what I proposed here. The things that are kind of a function of lineal frontage in terms of its cost impact would be prorated that way, and everything else would stay EMV, which is pretty much what your methodology is. We're, again, just taking some of these nuances out. But so I mentioned under the notes, the chargeable corner properties will be charged at the same manner as non-corner properties under the new formula. So embedded in that is they would see an increase even with a flat service charge revenue. The same with that the chargeable residential only properties would be charged in the same manner as commercial and mixed. So there are some residential, not residential condos, but residential apartments, things like that, that are paying a portion of the service charges that they would just be treated like everybody else, is what this formula would do. And part of that is, you know, we're treating a large apartment building the same as a small apartment building effectively from an equity standpoint is the rationale behind that. So
what if someone did build a mixed use condominium property that had a first floor retail and then, you know, X number of for sale condos above it?
Yeah, so we have that in the district now. We have that circumstance. It's a condoed building, residential condos above, commercial condos on the ground level. In that case, only the commercial condos are charged. So again, in keeping with this, both of the current and existing residential condominium properties are not charged now, nor would be in the future, even in a redevelopment scenario. Jackie and Nicholas. Oh, Nicholas might be in a call. Nicholas or Jackie?
When would this go into effect if we adopt it?
Would be next pay 2022. So this year's service charges are already set and been applied and everything. So this would be go into effect with the budget you just recommended. So next year.
Do we have any feel of what that would do to the majority of folks' assessments?
We've done some analysis, and some properties, you know, I would say most, it is not a substantial amount of money. Like, don't quote me on this. We're talking certainly in the hundreds, low hundreds, if not even less than that, quite honestly. Some, it's literally less than $100 difference. And a lot of it just depends on, are they a corner property now? Are they treated differently as the current methodology proposes? So there's a lot of things that kind of wash out of this, if you will. There clearly are properties that are on the ends though. Some will, you know, greatly benefit by this because they're just paying differently now under the current methodology, and they would, because others are paying more, they would pay less. But there's one on the other end of that too, that, you know, there are some properties that would pay, you know, a healthy chunk more. And I want to be clear, we've done a very preliminary analysis without running a sort of a parcel by parcel analysis. So, and I know we've talked about that in the past, and we really, it's a best practice for the board to make a recommendation based on the conceptual understanding for equity purposes than it is to say, well, what are the impacts on me? Because now I might feel differently because you are representing all the property owners in the district, not just your own. So that's why we aren't showing you a matrix. But it is, you know, I would say the vast majority of, you know, the several hundred parcels in the district it's in the hundreds, one way or the other.
I was actually thinking if the majority were a slight decrease, would it make sense to increase our budget to stabilize that so people weren't paying less next year? But if it's that nominal, maybe we don't need to worry about it.
Yeah, and I would say one of the things we were thinking about is presuming that you would probably adopt a flat service charge budget for next year. That really is a very good time to do this, because if you do it in a year where you're increasing, then the impact is, you know, a multiple, right, of for those properties that are on one end or the other. So at least since it's revenue neutral to the district, it's not never revenue neutral to some individual properties, to be clear. If there's a good time to make a change, it's when your budget is flat. So we would recommend not increasing it to address what you would. We could look at that, but we wouldn't recommend that. And just given the economics of the district and stuff like that, so.
Yeah, I'm fine with the theory. I think the methodology we're using doesn't make sense. So anything's going to be better than what we were doing.
Yeah. Conceptually, this proposal makes sense to me. I have to be on a call in 3 minutes, so.
And we lost Nicholas, unfortunately. Nicholas, can you hear me? We'd like to take a vote on this. Oh, man. Can you guys just hang out for one more minute if we get Nicholas back? We
Can
haven't
Dan vote
that we
now?
will. What's that?
Can we make a motion and second it and let Dan vote now if he's got to go?
Yeah,
Nope.
Nicholas, hey,
There we go.
he's back.
Sorry about that. Go ahead. I second or third the motion.
Okay, so I'm just going to do a quick roll call on that. So on the motion to adopt the proposed methodology commencing with page 2022, Nicholas makes the motion. Who would like to second it?
Second. Bob seconded this one.
We'll give it to Bob for the historical, if everybody's okay with that. So on the motion, if there's no further discussion, I'll call the roll. Bob Sorensen?
Aye.
In trouble?
Aye.
Jackie Knight?
Aye.
And Nicholas Hall?
Aye.
And I will note that Jeff Herman, Nick Walton, and who is our Mike Finn are not present, but that motion still passes. So thank you. We will implement that for next year. And one final thing, we have a request from the property owner at 1623 West Lake Street, which is one of those zone, but commercial, but residential. They actually would want to opt into wrap services around their corner onto James Avenue. So we're going to be, once we do the calculations, we'll be giving them an estimate, and because it's an opt-in situation for that side street, but we believe that they will opt in, and they have approached us and have wanted that to happen. So we will update the service maps accordingly, assuming that all goes forward, and that would all go into effect for next year as well. There being no further business, if there isn't any, we can adjourn. All right, with that, thank you all. Know that we're reachable, phone, text, email. Thank you for your time, and we're going to end at 1:29. Thank you all.
Have a good day.
Appreciate it.
Everybody.
Thank you.